This is part 2 of my research of the pelicaras or face peelers in Peru. Here, I will talk about Viktor Grebennikov and his discoveries, which offer an explanation of what technology the attackers might be using and also can explain many other aspects of the UFO phenomenon. Viktor Grebennikov was a self-proclaimed Russian scientist, biologist, entomologist, and paranormal researcher. He is best known for his claim to have invented a levitation platform which operated by attaching dead insect body parts to the underside. Grebennikov wrote detailed accounts of his experiences flying over the Russian countryside using his levitation device. These flying experiences, as well as his reported observations of other paranormal phenomena, usually involving insect nests or parts, appear in his self-published book, My World. In 1988, he discovered anti-gravitational effects of chitinous covers of some insect species. But the most astonishing attendant phenomenon associated with anti-gravity was a phenomenon of overall either partial invisibility or deformed visual perception of the material object, which was located in a zone of compensated gravitation. Based on this discovery, and by using bionics principles, the author designed and built an anti-gravitational platform, and also, practically, developed principles of manned flight with the speed up to 25 km/h. Since 1991-92, the device was used by the author as a means of fast movement. I managed to find his book, My World, or at least parts of it. It was heavily censored by the publishers, and many parts of the text and pictures were cut out. Here are the most notable parts of the book. He claims that anti-gravity can be found in nature. Biogravitational effects are a wide spectrum of natural phenomena, apparently not confined to just a few species of insects. There is much empirical data to support the possibility of a lowered weight or complete levitation of material objects as a result of directed psychophysical human action, psychokinesis, e.g., levitation of yogi practicing transcendental meditation, according to the Maharishi method. There are known cases of mediums levitating during spiritistic sessions. However, it would be a mistake to think that such abilities are only found in people who are gifted by nature. Biogravitational effects are a wide spectrum of natural phenomena, apparently not confined to just a few species of insects. I am convinced that these abilities are an understudied biological regularity. As is known, human weight significantly drops in the state of somnambulistic automatism, sleepwalking. During their nocturnal journeys, 80-90 kilo sleepwalkers are able to tread on thin planks or step on people sleeping next to them without causing the latter any physical discomfort other than fright. Quote, based on the structure of bee nests, I created a few dozen artificial honeycombs of plastic, paper, metal, and wood. It turned out that the cause of all those unusual sensations was not a biological field, but the size, shape, number, and the arrangement of caverns formed by any solid objects. And as before, the organism felt it, while the instruments were silent. I called the discovery the cavernous structures effect, CSE, and carried on with my experiments. Nature continued to reveal its innermost secrets, one after another. It turned out that clocks, both mechanical and electronic, placed in a strong CSE field, started running inaccurately. Time must also have a part in it. All this was the manifestation of the will of matter, constantly moving, transforming, and eternally existing. He discovered that this CSE affects time. This explains the many cases of missing time and other time anomalies reported by people who had close encounters with the phenomena. Quote, my pocket, battery-powered calculator often malfunctioned in the CSE field. It either erred, or sometimes its display window would fail to light up for hours. Here we can see the anti-gravity effect affecting electronics, causing it to malfunction. Sounds familiar? In many close encounters, we have failing electronic equipment. Quote, I will also note that hands with their tubular phalanxes, joints, ligaments, blood vessels, and nails are intensive CSE emanators capable of giving a powerful push to the straw or coal indicator of my little instrument from a couple of meters distance. Practically anyone could do it. This is why I am convinced that there are no people with supersensory abilities, or rather, that all the people have them. And the number of those who from a distance can move lightweight objects on a table, hold them suspended in the air or magnetically attached to the hand, is far greater than is usually thought. Once it dawned on me, the results of my experiments with insect nests bear too much similarity to the reports of people who happen to be in the vicinity of UFOs. Think and compare. temporary malfunctioning of electronic devices, disrupted clocks, i.e., time, an invisible, resilient obstacle, a temporary drop in the weight of objects, the sensation of a drop in human weight, phosphenes moving, colored flashes in the eyes, a galvanic taste in the mouth. In my flight, I am supported by a flat, rectangular little platform, slightly bigger than the seat of a chair, with a pole and two handles to which I hold on and with whose help I navigate the device. Is this science fiction? I wouldn't say so. Here he is talking about how the anti-gravity produced by his device is affecting visibility and creating optical illusions. This is because gravity bends light. Quote, I am not seen from the ground, and not just because of the distance. Even in a very low flight, I cast almost no shadow. Yet, as I found out later, people sometimes see something where I am in the sky, either a light sphere, a disk, or something like a slanted cloud with sharp edges that moves, according to them, not exactly the way a cloud would. One person observed a flat, non-transparent square, about 1 hectare in size. Could it have been the optically enlarged little platform of my device? Most people see nothing at all, and I am, for the moment, pleased with it. I can't be too careful. Besides, I still haven't determined what my visibility or invisibility depends on. The effect was also causing problems with his camera, again similar to many UFO cases. Alas, nature established its own strict limitations on my work. Just as on a passenger plane I could see but couldn't photograph. My camera shutter wouldn't close, and both rolls of films I had taken with me, one in the camera, the other in my pocket, got light struck. More about time distortions. Quote, by the way, besides the camera, I sometimes had trouble with my watch, and possibly with the calendar too. Descending on a familiar glade, I would occasionally find it slightly out of season, with a 2-week deviation, and I had nothing to check it against. Thus, it is possible to fly not just in space, but also, or so it seems, in time as well. I cannot make the latter claim with a 100% guarantee, except perhaps that in flight, particularly at its beginning, a watch runs too slow and then too fast, but at the end of the excursion starts running accurately again. Here is a possible explanation of the secretiveness of the UFO phenomenon. Quote, thus it is possible to fly not just in space, but also, or so it seems, in time as well. I cannot make the latter claim with a 100% guarantee, except perhaps that in flight, particularly at its beginning, a watch runs too slow and then too fast, but at the end of the excursion starts running accurately again. This is why I stay away from people during my journeys. If time is involved alongside gravitation, I might perhaps accidentally disrupt cause and effect relations, and someone might get hurt. He is saying on his trips with the levitating platform, he went to research insects. He put some specimens in test tubes, and later he discovered they had disappeared. This could explain the ability of the UFOs to suddenly vanish. Quote, this is where my fears were coming from. Insects captured there disappear from test tubes, boxes, and other receptacles. They disappear mostly without a trace. Once a test tube in my pocket was crushed to tiny bits. Another time there was an oval hole in the glass, with brown, as though chitin edges. Many times I felt a kind of burning or an electric shock inside my pocket, perhaps at the moment of my prisoner's disappearance. One of the insects was turned into chrysalis. Again, time paradoxes. Quote, only once did I find a captured insect in the test tube, but it wasn't the adult ichneumon with white rings on its feelers, but its chrysalis, i.e., its earlier stage. It was alive. It moved its belly when touched. He describes how he discovered the effect. I put the small, concave chitin plate on the microscope shelf in order again to examine under strong magnification its strangely star-shaped cells. I again admired this masterpiece of nature and almost purposelessly placed it on top of another identical plate that had the same unusual cells on one of its sides. But no. The detail broke loose from my tweezers. For a few seconds, it hung suspended above the other plate on the microscope shelf, turned a few degrees clockwise, slid to the right, turned counterclockwise, swung, and only then abruptly fell on the desk. You can imagine what I felt at that moment. Even a relatively large object, such as a paper tack, could not fall on it. Something pushed it up and aside. When I attached the tack on top of the block, I witnessed such incredible, impossible things. For example, the tack for a few moments was lost from sight, that I realized it was no beacon, but something else entirely. After his first test flight on the next day, he saw news about aliens and UFOs. Quote, news on TV and in newspapers was more than alarming. Headlines, such as UFO over Zadalinka and aliens again, meant that my flight had been detected. But how? Some perceived the phenomenon as glowing spheres or disks. Many actually saw not one sphere, but two. Others claimed they had seen a real saucer with windows and rays. He thinks that other scientists have made similar discoveries. Quote, March of 1990 was particularly rich in UFO sightings in Siberia, near Nelchik, and especially in Belgium, where, according to Pravda, on March 31st, the engineer Marcel Alferlane took a 2-minute film of the flight of a huge triangular craft which, according to Belgian scientists, were none other than material objects with a capacity no civilization can currently create. Is it really so? As for me, I would suggest that the gravitational filter platforms, or as I call them, panel blocks, of these machines were in fact small, triangular, and made here on Earth, but with more sophistication than my half-wooden contraption. He explains that the anti-gravity effect produced a force field around him, protecting him from wind and G-forces, just as we can see in many descriptions of UFO crafts. That explains how they can move at enormous speed, have instant acceleration, make 90-degree turns, and travel really fast underwater. This force field is negating G-forces. Quote, the speed of my flight is quite high, but there is no wind in my ears. The platform's force field has carved out from space an upward diverging invisible column that cuts the platform off the Earth's gravitational pull. But it left me and the air inside the column, intact. I think that all this, as it were, parts space in flight, and then closes it behind me. The propulsion principle of my device is such that the platform makes no sound whatsoever, because there is practically no air friction. This explains why those fast-moving UFOs don't produce a sonic boom when they break the sound barrier. The anti-gravity force field can also be used to make an armor which will repulse anything fired at it if the material that it's made of has the same anti-gravity effect or cavernous structural effect as Grebennikov calls it. Remember, the villagers in Peru were saying that they fired at the attackers and they didn't fall. This technology has been discovered a long time ago and is being kept secret, not just by the USA, but by many other countries. I suspect it's being kept secret by a breakaway civilization so they can maintain technological superiority, but I will make another video about that. Subscribe so you don't miss it. Grebennikov goes on to speculate if other people have made the same discovery as him. Quote, a thought occurs to me. What if I am not the only one out of 5 billion people to have made my discovery? What if flying devices based on the same principle, both homemade and professional, have long been constructed and tested, but all screening platforms have the same quality? Sometimes they become visible to other people. Pilots, too, are transformed. They're seen as humanoids in silver costumes, either short and green or flat as if made of cardboard, Voronezh, 1989, etc. Thus, it may very well be that these are not alien UFO crewmen, but temporarily deformed, of course, to outside observers, earthly pilots, and builders of little platforms, such as mine, who have made their inventions reliable. He even mentions the hitchhiker effect mentioned in many UFO cases. Keep in mind that this book was written in 1999. Quote, the best site for testing is a distant forest glade as far away from human habitation as possible. Otherwise, a phenomenon known as poltergeist could occur in the radius of a few dozen meters, unexplained movements of household objects, switching off or on of household electric appliances, and even fires. I myself have no explanation for all this, but it seems that these phenomena are the consequence of temporal disruptions, a complicated and treacherous thing. Not a single, even tiniest fragment or particle should be dropped either during the flight or in the landing area. I am certain that part of UFO descriptions are actually those of platforms, panel blocks, and other large parts of devices deliberately or accidentally taken out of the active field by their designers and makers. These fragments are capable of causing much trouble to others, or at best, to generate a series of improbable tales and stories in papers and magazines, often accompanied by scientific commentary. I found another scientist who had discovered the same effect. His name is Dan Davidson. He describes it in a book called Shape Power. This is part of his presentation on the subject.
So I think that this is a valid phenomenon, and I'll show you why. Next slide is a micrograph that I took of a beetle inner wing. This is at 100x. If you look closely at this thing, you can see rows of bumps all along the bottom of this wing. Each row is staggered from the next row next to it. And this is all over the surface of the bottom of the wing. Now, I don't know of any aerodynamic surface that has bumps all over the bottom to help it fly better. If you blow this up to 430x, you can start to see some of this microstructure of the cells that form where these bumps are. The next slide, at 970x, you start to see what these bumps that stick up are. They're hairs, look like hairs or fibers that grow out of the center of these hexagonal cells. And of course, this harkens back to my basic shape power discovery, is that each one of these, because of their shape going down to a point, is creating a magnetic field. And remember, a magnetic field is a rotating piece of vortex in the ether.
This is the end of part 2. In the next part, I will talk about the PhD research I found about the legend of the Pelecaras in South America. Is it just a legend, though? Subscribe so you don't miss it.